Josh MC 2000 here today, and we're going to be doing the first of what is, this is basically what the In the Mind series has become, Arkham Files, as I'm now going to be calling it. This is episode 1, which is Red Hood, or Jason Todd. I just thought, this is two mental health conditions I find quite interesting, so I thought I'd cover it. And it's also a bit more of a positive light to cover them under as well, given the fact that the character is an anti-hero instead of a criminal. So, yeah, let's get on with that. Okay, the first thing I want to address here is why I've not just done this for Punisher, because most of you out there are probably thinking Punisher and Red Hood are wired almost the same, right? Well, for those of you who are non-comic book readers, your assumption would be incorrect. The mental inner workings of Frank Castle and Jason Todd, although similar, are completely different, and I personally believe, minus one mental health condition, that is triggered by two completely different reasons, that there's nothing the same about these two men in terms of the way they're wired upstairs in their head. Like, you know, yeah, they may want the same thing, but they want it for different reasons, and their head is in a different place completely. So, maybe if you ask, I might do a Punisher one of these in the future, but there are multiple Punisher ones out there, and honestly, if you want to see the difference between my analysis of Red Hood and Punisher, I will link a really good Punisher one in the description, which that was mostly the main reason why I decided not to cover Punisher. Is that one already explained it pretty well. Punisher is a trauma victim, and he suffers from trauma. Whereas Jason Todd is completely different. He's a completely different kettle of fish. As a matter of fact, he's in a much darker place than Frank Castle, in my opinion. And I'm going to explain that to you now. Okay, now, if I refer to Red Hood as the patient, that is because I'm going to be looking at this in this kind of context. Imagine this. This is the context. You work for GCPD. You are a police officer. You've gathered what information you can on the patient, Red Hood, and you bring it to me. And I am somebody who's working at Arkham. I'm not saying I'm an actual medical trained professional here. I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'm working at Arkham. And you present me with what limited files you have on the Red Hood, and you say, look, this is all we've got. Can you get a diagnosis? Doesn't tell me his name. Doesn't tell me anything. Okay. We're going straight into this now. And also, I will say I have no medical qualifications going into this. This is just me researching on Google and covering that. The two YouTube videos at the top and this Google search is primarily what I put in for the research. Most of my research was on the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath, because I'm gonna put it in as simple terms as possible here, but I'll talk about that more later. Because one of the other mental health conditions I've already researched before, and I can give you a pretty detailed explanation of that off my own bat, because I covered it when talking about something through schoolwork. Anyway, let's get straight on to this. Condition 1, PTSD. This is the site I used to pull some facts from. I've pulled this basic list of symptoms from the site above. Someone who suffers from PTSD, they are often exposed to trauma, mistakes in surgery, war. War is probably the most common one. You mostly hear this particular condition being referred to when talking about war veterans from World War I, II, and Afghanistan, and also Vietnam. And when I said there's only one mental health condition in this list that Jason shares with Punisher, this is the one I was referring to, because Frank Castle is confirmed in canon to suffer from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder for the longer version. Basic symptoms of PTSD is experiencing re-experiencing traumatic events through flashbacks and nightmares. This can also lead the patient to suffer from inability to sleep or emotional numbness. It can also cause them to have aggressive feelings or easily agitated, as well as feeling incredibly jumpy. Like, you know, say if you were to... Prime example of this is a war veteran and you pop a champagne cork. To them, that is highly likely going to sound like a gun, and you could cause them to have a flashback, or like some kind of, you know, I've seen a lot of people on the internet take the mick out of this condition because of like hashtag Vietnam flashbacks and stuff, but it's not funny. This is actually probably one of the worst conditions to live with on here. This is the second condition. A lot of people don't even realize you are the second condition unless you look it up, because to a lot of people that would just seem normal. But PTSD, this can deprive people of sleep. It causes people a lot of discomfort, and it's even been known to drive people to suicide. It's not a pleasant condition. This is probably the easiest to cure though out of the two of Jason's conditions, because this, you can be given counselling, therapy, all sorts. However, it may be more extreme in Jason's case given the Lazarus Pit and other information. For example, resurrected back from the dead, so he has memories of his own death that causes trauma and PTSD. Not only that, but recently in Rebirth it suggested he's had quite a rough childhood, and also part of that plays into his PTSD, and is quite frequently shown to be having flashbacks and nightmares in canon. Both New 52, Pre-52, and like pretty much nearly every single interpretation of Red Hood, he has been shown to have flashbacks and nightmares, and difficulty sleeping as well is a big one. Anyway, PTSD is the most obvious one, that's why I'll put that first, just get that out of the way. Now we're going to be getting into the really difficult one to explain. Condition 2, sociopathic behavior, or being a sociopath. I'm sorry, I could not find the correct medical word. I think it's I can't think of it. This is a basic rundown of symptoms: cold, manipulative, emotionless, lack of empathy, responds to rewards strongly, you know. It's just like, basically, these two conditions, sociopathic and psychopathic, they used to be able to be used interchangeably, and this is where a lot of my research was spent. A lot of my research hours for this video is spent, because at one time, a sociopath and psychopath, the terms used to be interchangeable, the terms used to mean exactly the same thing, because these two conditions only really have two key differences. And the biggest key difference, like, you know, mostly they're the same. They're both cold, they're both manipulative, they're both emotionless, they both tend to lie. And if you go up and watch both videos that I had linked in the first panel, you know, there's this thing where sociopaths and psychopaths just have this stare, and it's really uncomfortable. That's because they cannot empathize with you. They cannot realize that they are making you feel uncomfortable. Because the part of the brain that is related to empathy does not light up. Like, this was tested. They took inmates at a prison that were suspected of suffering from this disorder, and they played them footage of like things like people trapping their fingers in car doors. Like, you know, if you flinched when I said that, you're probably not a sociopath. Like, you know, someone trapping their fingers in a car door. A patient that was a sociopath, I can't remember the name of the part of the brain, but a part of the brain didn't light up, but another part of the brain did. Whereas a well patient or a normal person, their brain lit up in the area responsible for empathy and reaction to pain. Whereas a sociopath, that area of the brain didn't light up. That area of the brain is completely dead. It just doesn't work. Now, another key difference between a psychopath and sociopath is a psychopath is biological. You are often born with the genetics of a psychopath, whereas a sociopath develops it through experiences. This is the first argument that I would make when diagnosing Red Hood or Jason Todd. Because he wasn't like this as Robin, I would definitely say it leans more towards sociopathic behavior than psychopathic, because he's developed it through his experiences. Now, as I put there, an example of a sociopath is someone like Yagami from the Death Note series, somebody who has a moral compass necessarily, but has all of the above features. Another example is Sherlock Holmes. A quote from him: "I'm not a psychopath, I'm a highly functioning sociopath." Next, the best way to do this, to explain the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath, is to explain the two things. A psychopath is someone like the Joker: no remorse, no empathy, cold, calculating, cruel, lying, just no moral compass whatsoever. Whereas a sociopath, someone like Jason Todd, like Yagami, they have a moral compass, but when compared to most people, their moral compass seems dark, corrupted. I mean, like, the example that came to mind when we were talking about this, my mother works at a medical library, so I actually brought this up with her when trying to, because I explained to her, I'm not crazy or anything, I'm just trying to do a video for my YouTube, and I'm trying to figure out what the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath is. Because I've read somewhere that they can be the terms can be interchangeable, so are they the same thing? And basically we came to the conclusion, what goes through a psychopath's mind is, I'm going to kill this person because it's fun, I'm going to kill this person because it's entertaining. The example I've given here is Joker. Joker goes around killing everybody because to him life is just one big joke. It's funny, it's amusing to watch people die. Whereas a sociopath like Red Hood or Rorschach, they do what they do to stop criminals. They do what they do because they believe it is right. In their mind, they do not. Whereas a sociopath sees a corrupted version of right and wrong, a psychopath sees no right and wrong. So it's like, a man like the Joker sees no right and wrong. Nothing matters. Nothing's important. Whereas a man like Jason Todd, he looks at the world in a darker way than everybody else, but what he's doing, he sees as right. And also what I said earlier about the anger and the violence, that more often than not is probably akin to both conditions. Post-traumatic stress disorder can cause heightened anger, irritation, which means he can be easily irritated by his surroundings. Hang on, I'm just going to move on to the slide for the conclusion. But also, his heightened level of violence is probably due to his sociopathic nature. He probably doesn't see that killing a criminal in a violent way, such as the example shot here, he probably doesn't see doing that as wrong. He sees that as a warning. Well, actually, no, correction. Joker would probably see that as not being right and wrong. Let me explain this a little better. Joker would see that as nothing wrong. He'd probably laugh at it. But Red Hood sees it as a necessary evil. He sees it as him having to do something to prove a point, to intimidate and scare people. And also, the biggest thing with both individuals that I've just analysed, neither of them has any remorse for their actions. And that is probably the most frightening thing about both conditions. A lack of remorse for anything they do. Because to a sociopath, everything they do is either down to a belief system or a corrupted moral compass that's been developed through their lifespan. And Jason Todd not only has a belief system, but he also has a corrupted moral compass, which would fit in with both of these points. Whereas someone like Frank Castle that is traumatized, he's so wrapped up in the death of his family that he doesn't care what he's doing. Whereas if he snapped out of it one day, he'd probably think, oh my god, what have I done? Whereas someone like Red Hood, he will never have that moment of clarity. He will never have that moment of sitting down and snapping out of it and thinking, what the hell have I done? Jason will go through the entirety of his life thinking what he's done is right. Because that is the way he views the world. He sees the world as good and evil. And he sees it that in order for good to be protected, evil has to be eliminated. This is why I use the example of Light Yagami. Because Light Yagami didn't have... Light Yagami had a corrupted moral compass. But he had a belief system. He had a god complex, almost. And I know this part of my channel, Comic Book Carnage, is primarily based around DC and Marvel, but if you wanted me to do something based upon the Death Note anime or manga, like maybe an Arkham Files episode, just let me know, and a good portion of it will probably be spent about talking about sociopathic behaviors again. But the thing is, with a lot of vigilantes like Red Hood, a lot of them are sociopaths because they see the world differently than most people. It's not that they're damaged. Not all of them are damaged. It's more they're wired differently than most people. They just see the world that little bit differently, which allows them to go out and do what they do. Someone like Rorschach, he doesn't take a meat cleaver to a guy's head with the same mental wiring as you or I. Red Hood doesn't do what he's doing in that picture with the same mental wiring as me or you. Because if me or you did that, our empathy for the person we've just done it to would kick in. Or our normal moral compass would say to us, this is wrong. We're taking this too far. Whereas someone like those individuals, they see the world through darker eyes. That's probably the main thing I can come to through this. These people are not well. People like Rorschach, Red Hood, they are definitely ill. And they would probably benefit from either therapy or being in an asylum. But at the same time, a place like Gotham, maybe it needs somebody to make an example. And that's the argument he would make. That a place like Gotham needs something more frightening than Batman. That people need to know their actions have consequences. But at the end of the day, sociopaths don't often think, but if their actions have consequences, what are the consequences from my actions? Because most sociopaths think nobody's above them. Hence, Light Yagami having a god complex. Because he believes he is the highest of the high. He believes he's the top of the top. Whereas not all sociopaths have a god complex. A number of them might do. And it might be because they can get away with things that other people can't. Now, Jason Todd doesn't quite have a god complex, but he has been shown to be quite arrogant about his own abilities and about his own ideals. So, it's not too much of a stretch to say he wouldn't be too far from having a god complex. He's probably just a few more pushes away from being that. And a lot of vigilante characters that you see in media either seem to suffer from PTSD or sociopathic behaviors. This is because these are really the only two conditions that would allow a normal person to go out and do such things. Because most people have remorse, have guilt, emotions that would get in the way of doing such things. That's why I could probably sit here and list off a large number of characters that have these disorders and have these issues. But I'm gonna leave it there now. This video has been dragging on for long enough. Let me know, did you like this kind of style of video? Would you want to see it again? Or is this just another shot in the dark for an idea that isn't gonna work? But you know, please leave me some feedback, and also if you do some little research yourself and you find something that I missed in this video, please let me know. I may do a reduxed or updated version of this file further on down the line.